The auction block smelled of ozone and despair. Marcus Cole stood among 37 other humans, wrists bound with energy cuffs that hummed against his skin, watching the Velarith nobility inspect them like livestock at a county fair back home. "This one has scars," a tall female with silver-blue skin remarked, running a clawed finger down his forearm. "Damaged goods. Mining accident," Marcus said flatly. "Lost 6 men that day. I carried 2 of them out." The noble recoiled slightly, not from his words but from the directness of his gaze. Velarith servants did not look their betters in the eye. Marcus had read the cultural briefings during the long journey here. He simply didn't care. Earth's delegation had sold passage rights through Velarith space in exchange for cultural workers, a diplomatic term for indentured servants. 50 years of service for humanity's access to 17 star systems. Marcus had volunteered. His daughter needed the signing bonus for her treatments, and he had nothing left to lose after Sarah's death. The grand hall of House Kalindra gleamed with bioluminescent crystals that pulsed in rhythm with some unheard heartbeat. Hundreds of Velarith nobles filled the viewing galleries, their elongated forms draped in living fabric that shifted colors with their moods. Most showed deep purple, amusement, superiority. Lot 42, the auctioneer announced. Human male, 38 solar cycles. Former emergency response coordinator. Starting bid, 12,000 imperial credits. A smattering of bids rose and fell. Marcus watched without expression. He'd accepted his fate. 5 decades of servitude in an alien empire where humans ranked somewhere between furniture and exotic pets. 15,000, someone called. 16, 20,000 credits. The hall fell silent. Marcus turned toward the new voice and felt his breath catch. He stood alone in a private alcove, separated from the other nobles by an invisible wall of empty space. Her skin was pale lavender, almost white, and where other Velarith displayed elaborate horn patterns, hers were partially broken, shattered, he realized, deliberately filed down. A mark of shame. Princess Cyrillith Val Kalindra, 3rd daughter of the Empress. He recognized her from the briefings, though the documents hadn't mentioned the broken horns, or the way other nobles refused to look at her. "The princess bids 20,000, the auctioneer said, his voice carefully neutral. "Any other offers?" Silence. Not the silence of respect, but of disgust. Marcus saw it in the way the noble's fabrics shifted to muddy brown, contempt. "Sold to Her Highness Princess Cyrillith." 2 guards escorted Marcus to the alcove. Close. Cyrillith was smaller than he'd expected, barely reaching his shoulder. Her eyes were deep violet, and they studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "You looked at me," she said quietly. "When I bid. No other human has ever looked at me." "Should I not have? They told you who I am, the disgraced princess. 3rd in line to nothing. Something about a political scandal involving enough." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "You know enough." She turned away, her living dress rippling through shades of gray. "Follow me. Do not speak to anyone, do not look at anyone, but I can look at you?" She paused, not turning back. "You may be the only one left who will." The walk through the palace corridors took nearly an hour. Servants pressed themselves against walls as they passed, not for the princess, Marcus realized, but to avoid her. Like she carried some contagion. Her quarters were in the eastern tower, far from the main palace. Once these rooms might have been beautiful. Now they held the shabby elegance of a place forgotten by those who maintained it. Dust gathered in corners. Crystal panels flickered with failing light. "You'll serve as my attendant," Cyrillith said, settling into a chair that had seen better decades. "The duties are simple. Bring meals. Maintain the chambers. Provide companionship during the long hours when no one comes." She smiled, and it was the saddest expression Marcus had ever seen. "I'm told humans are good at conversation. I haven't had a real one in 3 years." "What happened?" Marcus asked. 3 years ago? I refused a marriage alliance. Man was cruel. I had seen what he did to his servants, to his previous wives. I thought my mother would understand. I thought blood meant something." Her fingers traced the broken stubs of her horns. "I was wrong." Marcus stood in the doorway, uncertain. In his 40 years of life he'd fought fires, pulled bodies from collapsed mines, held his wife's hand as she died from radiation poisoning. He'd thought he understood pain. But there was something in this alien woman's eyes that spoke of a loneliness so profound it had become its own gravity. "In my culture," he said slowly, "when someone is suffering alone, we don't leave them that way. Even if they're strangers. Even if it's not our place." Cyrillith looked up at him, those violet eyes shimmering. "And what would your culture have you do? Listen." "Nothing else." He stepped fully into the room. "I'm yours for 50 years, Your Highness. Might as well start somewhere." The first tear that rolled down her cheek glowed faintly gold in the dim light. She wiped it away quickly, almost angrily. Human tears are worth more than gold in her empire. "I cried when the alien princess left," she whispered, reciting something that sounded like an old proverb. "That's what they say about the empress who founded our dynasty. She fell in love with a human diplomat centuries ago. When he returned to his homeworld, she wept, and her tears were collected as sacred relics. They powered our first starships. Cyrillith laughed bitterly. Now humans are sold at auction, and no one weeps for anyone. Maybe that's the problem, Marcus said quietly. When did your people stop crying? For a long moment, Cyrillith didn't answer. Then she gestured to a worn cushion near her feet. Sit, human, Marcus. And tell me, what do your people do when the tears won't come anymore? He sat. We find someone worth crying for. The night deepened around them, and neither moved to light the failing crystals. In the darkness, a disgraced princess and a bought servant began to talk, and for the first time in 3 years, Cyrillith didn't feel quite so alone. 3 months passed like water through cupped hands. Marcus learned the rhythms of Cyrillith's exile. The meals left outside the door by servants who never knocked. The official communications that never came. The silent hours between midnight and dawn, when she paced her chambers like a caged thing. He learned her tales too. The way her dress shifted to pale blue when she was genuinely amused. The subtle flattening of her remaining horn ridges when she was angry. The tremor in her hands when she spoke of her family. You're staring again, she said one evening, not looking up from her reading tablet. You haven't eaten today. I'm not hungry, you said that yesterday. Marcus set a tray of food on the table beside her. The palace kitchen sent the same bland nutritional cubes every day. Punishment disguised as sustenance. But he'd started bribing one of the lower servants, trading small repairs and human stories for real food. Tonight's offering was something like grilled fish and vegetables that glowed faintly purple. Cyrillith looked at the plate, then at him. How, turns out, everyone wants to hear about Earth. Even the people who pretend humans are beneath them. He shrugged. I've been trading stories for favors. That's... She paused, searching for the word. Resourceful. No. Entrepreneurial. That's the human word, yes? Something like that. She picked up the eating implements, delicate crystal rods that Marcus still couldn't use properly, and took a careful bite. Her eyes closed, and for just a moment, her dress rippled through genuine gold. It's been so long since anything tasted like this. Eat slowly. Your stomach's probably shrunk. You speak to me like a nursemaid. Someone has to. Her eyes snapped open, but there was no anger in them. Surprise perhaps, and something else Marcus couldn't quite name. Why do you care, she asked. About whether I eat. Whether I sleep. You're a servant. You're bound to me by contract, not by choice. Why do you act as if my well-being matters? Marcus pulled up a chair across from her, a liberty no servant should take. But they'd long since abandoned those pretenses in private. Because it does matter, he said simply. Because you're a person and you're hurting, and where I come from that means something. Even if I'm alien? Even if my people treat yours as property. You didn't choose that. And you've never treated me as property. Cyrillith set down her eating rods. My mother would say that's a weakness. Treating a human as an equal. Your mother disowned you for having a conscience. Maybe her opinion isn't the standard we should be measuring by. The princess laughed, a genuine sound that startled them both. You're very bold for a man I own. You don't own me, Cyrillith. You're just borrowing my time. He leaned forward, and I'm bold because someone has to be. You've spent 3 years apologizing for doing the right thing. Someone needs to remind you that refusing to marry a monster wasn't a mistake. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. What was her name? Your wife. Question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd mentioned Sarah only once in passing weeks ago. He hadn't thought Cyrillith was listening. Sarah, he said, the name still sharp after 3 years. She was a radiation safety officer. The same accident that scarred my arms. She absorbed a lethal dose, pulling workers out of the hot zone. Took 3 months for the sickness to kill her. I'm sorry. Don't be. She died doing what she believed in. Saving people. Same reason I volunteered for this. He smiled faintly. She would have liked you, I think. She had no patience for people who played it safe when others were suffering. Cyrillith reached across the table, her long fingers hovering just above his scarred forearm. May I? Marcus nodded, his throat tight. Her touch was cool, almost electric. She traced the ridged scars with a gentleness that made his chest ache. On my world, scars are hidden, she murmured. They're evidence of failure. Weakness. But these are different, aren't they? They're proof I was there. Proof I tried. I think I understand. She withdrew her hands slowly, and Marcus found himself missing the contact immediately. Your people measure worth differently than mine. Maybe, or maybe worth is worth, and your people have just forgotten how to see it. Cyrillith stood, moving to the window that overlooked the forgotten gardens below. Her dress had settled into a soft, uncertain lavender. Vulnerability, Marcus had learned. There's a gathering tomorrow, she said. The Empress is hosting an alliance summit. All noble houses must attend, even disgraced ones. I'll be paraded as an example of what happens to those who defy imperial will. Do you want me to come with you? She turned, surprised. Servants don't attend summits. Attendants do. Personal attendants. Check the protocol. I did when I heard about the gathering. You're entitled to one companion. Everyone assumes you have none, so no one will expect it. But you're entitled. Something flickered in her eyes. You researched protocol? I research everything. Old habit. Emergency responders need to know the rules before they can break them. For the first time since he'd known her, Cyrilleth smiled without sadness. Very well, Marcus Cole. Tomorrow you'll see what my family thinks of me. And perhaps, she hesitated, perhaps you'll see why I've given up on changing it. Maybe, he said, standing to clear the dishes. Or maybe I'll see an opportunity. For what? Haven't figured that out yet. But I'll let you know. He left her chambers with the empty tray, and behind him he heard something he'd never heard before. Cyrilleth, humming softly to herself. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Grand Summit Hall made the auction house look like a storage closet. Crystalline pillars rose 300 meters to a ceiling that displayed real-time star maps of the Empire. Noble houses had gathered in strict hierarchical formation. The closer to the Empress's throne, the higher the status. Cyrilleth's place was at the very back, behind even the minor merchant guilds. Marcus walked 2 steps behind her, wearing the formal attire of a personal attendant. Simple gray robes that marked him as property, a collar that designated his owner. He'd accepted both without complaint. Blending in meant surviving long enough to be useful. The whispers started the moment they entered. Brought her human. Even she can't find a proper Velorith willing to serve. Pathetic, really. Reduced to alien companionship. Cyrilleth's spine remained rigid, her steps perfectly measured. But Marcus saw the slight tremor in her hands, the way her dress flickered through muddy grays before she forced it back to neutral. Steady, he murmured, barely audible. They're just words. Words for my own people. My own blood. The ceremony began with all the pomp Marcus had expected. Speeches about unity, strength, the eternal glory of the Velorith Empire. The Empress herself was a towering figure, her horns elaborate and gleaming, her presence magnetic. She spoke of the coming alliance with the Ventari Confederation, of trade routes and military cooperation. She did not once look at her daughter. 3 hours in, the formal proceedings gave way to social mingling. The real business of any political gathering. Marcus had seen it before, in human contexts. The handshakes that sealed deals, the quiet conversations that toppled governments. Here, it manifested as Cyrilleth standing alone while nobles flowed around her, like water around a stone. Your Highness. A male Velorith approached, tall, broad-shouldered, his horns polished to mirror brightness. Lord Vaethor, Marcus recognized from his research. The man Cyrilleth had been ordered to marry. Cruel one. Lord Vaethor. Cyrilleth's voice was ice. I see you found companionship at last. His eyes slid to Marcus with undisguised contempt. Though I suppose one takes what one can get, in your position. My position is quite comfortable, thank you, is it? Vaethor stepped closer, and Marcus saw Cyrilleth flinch almost imperceptibly. I hear things, Princess. About your failing tower. About your empty accounts. About the creditors circling. His smile was a blade. You could still fix this, you know. Apologize to your mother. Accept your duty. I might even be persuaded to take you back. I would sooner breathe vacuum. Vaethor's expression darkened. His hand shot out, grabbing Cyrilleth's wrist. You insignificant, Marcus moved without thinking. His hand closed around Vaethor's wrist, applying pressure to the nerve cluster he'd identified in his anatomical studies. The Velorith Lord gasped, releasing Cyrilleth, stumbling back. Apologies, my lord, Marcus said, his voice mild. Her Highness seemed unsteady. I was merely stabilizing her. The hall had gone silent. Every eye was on them. Vaethor's face contorted with rage. You dare? A human touching a noble, a personal attendant performing his duty. Marcus didn't flinch, as protocol allows. Section 47, subsection 12. Attendants may intervene physically to protect their principal's well-being. Shall I cite the full passage? You. Vaethor stepped forward, and Marcus braced for a blow. Enough. The word cut through the hall like a blade. The Empress herself had descended from her throne, her presence parting the crowd like a ship through waves. Mother, Cyrilleth whispered, and there was so much pain in that single word. The Empress studied the scene with cold, ancient eyes. Her gaze lingered on Marcus, assessing, calculating. The human is correct, she said finally. Protocol permits his action. She turned to Vaethor. And you, Lord, forget yourself. Whatever grievances you hold against my daughter, you will not air them in my hall. Vaethor bowed stiffly and retreated. The Empress turned to leave, then paused. Cyrilleth. This human of yours. He is... what, too? Unexpected. Yes, Mother. Unexpected can be dangerous. The Empress's eyes met Marcus's, and he saw something there, not warmth, but perhaps a grudging recognition. It can also be valuable. Consider that. She swept away, and the hall slowly returned to its murmuring normal. Saraleth's hand found Marcus's, her fingers trembling. You shouldn't have done that. Vathor will make you pay. Probably. You could be killed. Humans have no legal protections for striking a noble. I didn't strike him. I applied therapeutic pressure to assist with a muscular spasm. Despite everything, Saraleth laughed. A broken, disbelieving sound. You're insane. Maybe. But you're not hurt. That's what matters. Her fingers tightened around his. Why? Why would you risk yourself for me? Marcus turned to face her fully, ignoring the staring nobles, ignoring the protocol that said a servant should never look his owner in the eye. Because you were scared, he said simply. And I don't leave people alone when they're scared, not ever. Saraleth's eyes glistened. For a moment he thought she might cry. Those precious golden tears that her people had once considered sacred. Marcus. Her voice was barely a breath. I know. He squeezed her hand once, then released it, stepping back to his proper position. Later. We'll talk later. Right now you have a summit to survive. She nodded, composing herself with visible effort. When she turned back to the hall, her spine was straight, her expression serene. But her dress had shifted to a deep, warm gold, a color Marcus had never seen before on any Valorith. He didn't know what it meant, but he suspected it was significant. The summit continued for another 6 hours. They returned to Saraleth's tower exhausted, wrung out, and changed in ways neither could fully articulate. That night, for the first time, Saraleth asked Marcus to stay. Not in her bed, simply in her chambers, a presence in the darkness. He sat in his usual chair while she lay on her sleeping platform, and they talked until the artificial dawn began to brighten the windows. She told him about her childhood before the disgrace. He told her about Earth, about Sarah, about his daughter Emma, who was hopefully recovering in a hospital paid for by his sacrifice. When Saraleth finally fell asleep, her hand was extended over the edge of her platform, fingers reaching toward his chair. Marcus didn't touch her, but he stayed watchful until she woke. The assassin came 3 weeks later. Marcus was returning from the kitchens when he heard the crash, crystal shattering, a muffled scream. He dropped the tray and ran, muscle memory overriding every protocol that said a servant should call for guards. The door to Saraleth's chambers had been forced open. Inside, a figure in black grappled with the princess, a curved blade pressed to her throat. Stay back, human. The assassin's voice was distorted, mechanical. This doesn't concern you. Like hell it doesn't. Marcus moved. The fight was brutal and brief. The assassin was trained, professional, but Marcus had spent 15 years responding to emergencies where hesitation meant death. He fought dirty, eyes, throat, knees, and when the assassin finally went down, Marcus's hands were covered in purple blood that wasn't his own. Are you hurt? He was at Saraleth's side immediately, hands checking for wounds. No, I'm Marcus, your arm. He looked down. The assassin's blade had found him after all, a deep gash running from elbow to wrist. Blood, red human, dripped onto the crystal floor. It's fine. Surface wound. It's not fine. Saraleth's voice cracked. She grabbed a cloth from her bed, pressing it to the wound with shaking hands. You're bleeding. You're bleeding because of me. Saraleth, I can't lose you too. Words burst out of her, raw and desperate. I can't. I won't. He stopped staring at him and Marcus saw the moment everything changed. I love you, she whispered. I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you, Marcus Cole. And if you die protecting me, I will. He kissed her. It wasn't planned. It wasn't proper. It broke every rule of both their cultures. But in that moment, with blood on his hands and terror in her eyes, Marcus couldn't think of a single reason not to. She tasted like starlight and tears. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Saraleth's dress had shifted to pure, brilliant gold. That color, Marcus managed. What does it mean? It means, she laughed, tears streaming down her face, glowing faintly in the dim light. It means I'm yours. In the old way. The way my ancestors bound themselves before politics and protocol. It means I choose you. Your mother chose a human once. The empress who founded our dynasty, remember? Her tears powered starships. Saraleth cupped his face in her hands. Human tears are worth more than gold in her empire. Human love, it seems, is worth even more. The door burst open. Palace guards flooded in, followed by the empress herself, resplendent in armor that suggested she'd come prepared for war. Saraleth. The empress's eyes swept the room. The unconscious assassin, the blood, her daughter in the arms of a human. What is the meaning of this? The meaning, mother, is that Lord Vathor just tried to have me killed. Saraleth stood, but she didn't release Marcus's hand. And the meaning is that a human, a servant, a piece of property by your laws, just saved my life while your palace guards were nowhere to be found. The empress's expression flickered through emotions too quickly to track. Vathor? His assassin? His weapon? his revenge for the humiliation at the summit. Cyrillith's voice hardened. I was an inconvenience, mother. A reminder of your failure to control your own daughter. Vathor simply tried to remove the problem. I will have him, you will do nothing. Cyrillith stepped forward, and for the first time Marcus saw her as others must have once seen her. A princess, a power, a force? You cast me out for refusing to marry a monster. That monster just tried to murder me. And the only person who stood between me and death was a human you would have let be sold at auction. The Empress's jaw tightened. Cyrillith, I'm done apologizing, I'm done hiding, and I'm done pretending that your approval matters more than my own conscience. She raised her chin. Marcus Cole saved my life. By the old laws, the laws you claim to revere, that makes him worthy of recognition. It makes him worthy of me. You cannot seriously be suggesting, I'm not suggesting anything, mother. I'm telling you. I love him. If you want to exile me again, then do it. But you'll do it knowing that your treatment of me led directly to Vathor, thinking he could get away with murder. The silence stretched. Marcus watched the Empress's face, seeing the calculation behind her ancient eyes. Political implications. Alliance considerations. The potential scandal of a princess binding herself to a human versus the scandal of having nearly allowed her daughter's assassination. Finally, impossibly, the Empress smiled. You sound like me, she said softly. When I was your age. Before I learned to compromise. Maybe compromise isn't always the answer. No? Bow. Perhaps not. The Empress's gaze shifted to Marcus and he forced himself to meet it without flinching. Human. You understand what my daughter is offering? The complications? The enemies you will make? Yes, your majesty. And you accept anyway? I accepted the moment I volunteered to come here. I just didn't know what I was accepting yet. The Empress studied him for a long moment. Then, to his shock, she laughed. A genuine sound, rusty with disuse. Very well. Cyrillith Valkalindra, I formally recognize your choice. The human Marcus Cole is hereby elevated to consort status with all the protections and privileges that entails. She paused, and Lord Vathor will learn what it means to threaten my blood. Whatever our disagreements, daughter, you are still my blood. She swept out, guards in her wake, leaving Marcus and Cyrillith alone among the wreckage. Did that just happen? Marcus asked faintly. I think it did. Cyrillith turned to him, golden tears still tracking down her cheeks. Are you afraid? Terrified? But you're staying? I'm staying. He pulled her close, mindful of his wounded arm. 50 years, remember? Although I guess the contract terms have changed slightly. Slightly. She laughed against his chest. Marcus, yes, I'm going to cry now. Properly. For the first time in years. Okay. Will you hold me? For as long as you need. She wept, and he held her, and the golden tears that fell between them glowed like the light of distant stars, sacred, precious, and finally, freely given. Outside the window, dawn broke over the palace. It was the first day of something new. Something neither of them had expected. Something that felt against all odds like hope.